You're listening to the Grading Doan Podcast, brought to you by the 2019 Journalism Capstone class.
And that's right, this is the Grading Doan Capstone Project. This is episode 3. Myself, Clayton Anderson, CJ Keene, Trey Perry, behind the glass over there, making sure we're all good. Audio-wise, we are joined by Athletic Director Matt Franzen. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well.
So yeah, if you're unfamiliar, pretty nice day outside. Spring sports really in full swing, getting ready for conference play in softball, golf, baseball, track and field. What has it been like so far with the spring sports?
Well, the weather this year, as we've probably gotten off a little bit easy in this part of the state, but as you go north, the weather's been really hectic and problematic with some of the schedules, baseball, namely, and softball, and so some things have been moved, and some teams have been playing at some neutral sites and that. But outside of that, it's been I think a good spring. Our teams are doing well. I don't know if it's probably not a surprise to the guys on this particular team, but our men's tennis team has had a tremendous season up to this point, and that's something that hasn't happened in a while. And so some good things are happening.
Coach, with kind of your first year as athletic director and working with a school Doan size, what are some things that you've noticed from the inner workings of athletics, just that you guys have been trying to accomplish throughout all the seasons of sports and looking into the next couple of years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with the two ways to look at it, as a sports fan and as somebody who's working within the department, I think you always want to be successful in your competition, and so we want to build our programs from the standpoint of getting a little bit better each year and get to the point where we're competing for conference championships in every sport and competing for the all sports trophy at the end of the year within our conference. And so those are things that are constantly developing within the programs, and different programs are at different places from year to year within their development, and sometimes you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But then the other part of it is building the athletic department for the long haul. And there you're talking about things like facilities and major capital projects and donors and keeping donors happy and engaged and community relations and those sorts of things. And so those are all things that we're working on. Like I said, some of them have a little bit more immediate as far as wanting to see good things in competition, and then some things are a little bit more long-term with some of the capital projects.
You talked a little bit about building the athletic department year by year. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like going through the recruiting process for a school like Doan or of Doan size?
Yeah, so the recruiting and enrollment, that's something that at a school like Doan, I would say is really universal, that schools like this are enrollment driven. All schools are, but athletics plays a big part of that at a school like Doan, where we have about 1,000 to 1,100 students normally at the Creek campus, and we'll have 550 or so of those students will be athletes at the beginning of the fall, so over half of our students. And it's normally over 60% of the students with the incoming class are coming in as athletes. So as coaches are trying to recruit always for next year and bring in classes that are going to pay off for their sport in 2 and 3 years as those kids become juniors and seniors. But as the school goes, the school is also depending on all of those coaches to do their job in recruiting to bring in students, period. And as far as the school goes, it doesn't have to be all conference athletes. It needs to be students who come in and do well in the classroom and stay here and graduate in 4 years. And so those are the different things you look at. And for the casual fan watching, obviously they want to see good athletes coming in. Those are the type of athletes that are generally going to develop into good college athletes and winning teams. But there's a lot more that goes into it, like I said, when you look a little bit deeper and realize how important it is to the university to bring in a good, healthy, academically strong recruiting class.
Another thing you touched on is donations and getting the money side of the athletic department, working with donors, stuff like that. What are some things that you've learned from that, and some things that like maybe you don't necessarily see in the forefront of athletics, and how important those donors and donations are?
Yeah, the the strange thing about that, and one of the differences or challenges in going from being a coach into administration is that you're planting seeds with potential donors all the time, which you hope are going to pay off maybe 5 or 10 years from now. And it's rare that you go talk to a donor and maybe that you haven't been working with for a long time, and all of a sudden they just make a substantial gift to a program or to the athletic department. You have to foster those relationships, and like I said, sometimes for a period of several years or even tens of years before finally this person is retired and their kids are out of school and they're in a place where maybe they can give a significant gift toward a program or even bigger toward maybe a new athletic building or that sort of thing. So it's trying to have really a long-term vision and not expecting the really fast turnaround on some of those things, but realizing that some of the conversations and relationships that are being built now hopefully will pay off several years down the road, and maybe even for the next round of administrators when this round is no longer here, either no longer working here, or maybe we're down the road to the happy hunting ground, and 50 years from now somebody leaves a significant gift to Doane to build the next Gaylord Hall or the next athletic complex for my grandkids type of thing. So it's just that it's a process that sometimes just you're probably not going to see the end of it, but you're doing your part now so that down the road it will pay off.
Sort of on a similar topic to that, what does having a well-funded and well-planned out athletic department do for the college at large?
Well, I think, again, for the college at large, it probably comes all the way back around to enrollment. And I think athletic departments that maybe aren't well planned out, that don't have a long-term plan on how we're going to sustain ourselves, there's probably a lot of ebb and flow. And there might be a big class that comes in, and then maybe a couple successful years in a certain program, and then the bottom drops out, and a lot of the athletes leave, and then you're starting over again. And as a healthy program, and a lot of it does come back to managing the finances and spending wisely and being conservative and that as well, but building a program where you're going to have healthy rosters year after year after year that are going to benefit the university. And in most programs, not every year is going to be a conference championship year. There are exceptions. In our school right here, our track and field programs, knock on wood, chances are 5 years from now and 10 years from now, we're still going to be strong in that program. For whatever reason, one that I've had to deal with for a lot of years, Morningside football. Chances are 5-10 years from now, they're still going to be really strong in what they do. But for most programs, you go through a phase where maybe there's a few good seasons, you have a really good talent pool, and then maybe you're back to more of a 500, and then a few years later you make another push. I think that's probably more the norm across the country, and that's fine. But again, you don't want to go 10-0, 10-0, and then have 4 years where you're 0-10, and then all of a sudden start to rebuild. You want to have pretty good consistency from year to year. And I think, again, going back to the bigger financial piece, I think the healthy institutions, healthy athletic departments are going to have healthy programs where the bottom doesn't drop out very often.
What is Doane working towards or feel that they have that sets them apart from similar schools, whether it be GPAC schools or similar private universities in the area with their athletic departments?
Well, I think we look at probably the bigger picture of the university, and the athletic department specifically. We have some neat things here at the Crete campus that that other schools don't have, but at the same time, everybody is constantly working on their next big thing, their next facility, trying to keep up with the Joneses. Mount Marty just announced they're building an indoor field house, multi-million-dollar project, and they're going to have turf on the infield of the indoor field house. And they also announced that they're adding football here in about 2 years. And so I think the turf goes hand in hand with that. So we don't have that specific piece, but we have a field house right now, for a track and field house with indoor tennis courts that rivals any field house in the conference. And the building is 50 years old, but we had a major renovation here about 5 years ago. And again, it comes down to funding. But that's one of the things that we have that really, I think, strengthens our university. The Haddock Center is really a showpiece with the weight room that's in there that not many, if any, schools in our league have a weight room that rivals what's in that building. But at the same time, we're already talking about we need a little more gym space because that one competition gym in the Haddock Center isn't big enough for all of our court sports. And we have teams that are practicing early in the morning or late into the evening, and that's not ideal, obviously, for students and student athletes. But as far as the university goes, the greater university, and I think it all ties in together. But the campus itself here is special. People that haven't been to Doane and come to campus for a game oftentimes comment on how neat the campus is if they have a chance to see some of the campus outside of the athletic facilities. But people around the league that have been around for a while talk about what a cool campus you have in Crete. And that's something. Academically, the school has always been strong, but we're also trying to grow in our online course offerings, which are going to be more available to undergrads than they ever have been over the next couple of years. That's going to continue to grow. And so some of those things which will help and I think help our athletic programs as well.
So you kind of got into this in your last answer, but looking like 10, 15, 20 years down the line, what are some of those improvements that we want to make here to keep up with the Joneses, as you said?
Well, in athletics specifically, like I mentioned, one of the things that we would really benefit from in athletics specifically is a little bit more gym space, practice space for our basketball teams and our volleyball team, the teams that live in the gym. The school itself needs a rec space, and right now we really don't have a good rec space that is designed for the students, for the student body, whether it's intramurals, and I think we can grow in that direction, a student fitness center, just a student rec center that the students can call their own, and they don't get bumped out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when it's time for basketball practice. And then the other thing back to athletics specifically is that we feel like we need a space specifically designed for wrestling, and we don't have that right now. And so ideally, and we haven't, as the article that came out recently on DoaneLine, we haven't started to put a concrete plan together, but ideally a building which would have a practice space, a student rec space, and a wrestling room would really benefit not just athletics, but I think the campus as a whole. So that's something that we're looking at. The Memorial Stadium area, there's no locker room space in the stadium, and so right now when visiting teams come to play, football specifically, where you really need a dressing area, the high school teams that play there with Crete High and also the college teams, they dress in Butler Gym. And Butler Gym is going to be significantly remodeled, and it will start hopefully within the next year. But what happens with that locker space right now, and if that goes away, then we need to provide something at the stadium for the visiting teams by way of a functional locker facility. And so those are a couple of things that I think would be the next logical steps in expanding and in bettering our facilities. The other things that we look at, and this ties back into enrollment, is that schools across the league are constantly adding sports, and not quickly, but every year there's a couple schools that will add a sport. And for us, there's some sports that are in our vision, again, not in our concrete plan yet, because I think facilities will dictate if and when it happens. But one of the sports that I think makes a lot of sense is women's wrestling. And in the state of Nebraska, for those who have noticed, women's wrestling or girls wrestling missed being sanctioned for the next school year by one vote. There are 50 delegates that vote, and I've just learned this recently, but they needed 30 votes to sanction girls wrestling for the 2019-2020 school year. They got 29 votes. So my guess is if that goes to the ballot again next year, they're probably going to get that one more vote. And when girls wrestling becomes a regular thing at the high school level, it makes too much sense to create that at the university, so then that those students can continue. And I think there's a real emerging market, and it's not necessarily emerging because several schools are already tapping into that market. But we need a facility. We're right now, for our men's wrestling team, practicing in Fear Fieldhouse is less than ideal. And so to say we're going to put a women's team in there too, it wouldn't work. We need a facility before we can take that next step.
All right. Well, Coach Franzen, we've really enjoyed your time. We think you're going to wrap this up, the third episode here of the Grading Doan podcast. Once again, thanks for coming in.
All right. Thank you, guys.
You're listening to the Grading Doan podcast, brought to you by the 2019 Journalism Capstone class.